In a world that's changing faster than ever, how do we really know if our universities are making a difference? We've looked at academic agility, we've talked about the rise of AI, but today we're asking something even more fundamental. Are we measuring what truly matters, or are we just, well, counting what's easy to count?
And this question, it really gets to the heart of a huge tension in higher education today. I mean, just think about it for a second. Is a professor who publishes 10 papers, maybe read by only a handful of colleagues, more impactful than one who invents a new teaching method that completely changes how thousands of students learn? It's not an easy one to answer, and it's shaping the very future of our universities.
So to really get to grips with this, we're going to explore two very different ways of thinking. On one side, you've got the traditional academic, who stands by the time-tested metrics, publications and citations. And on the other, the adaptive academic, who's arguing that in today's world, those old yardsticks just don't cut it anymore.
And that gets us right to the core of the issue, this constant push and pull between what we can easily produce, our outputs, and the real-world change we actually hope to create, the outcomes.
Okay, so let's start with the traditional viewpoint, which comes from a very pragmatic place. For centuries, academia has leaned on things you can measure. Publications, citations, journal rankings. These are tangible signs of scholarly work. They give us structure that let us compare different institutions, and they build credibility. The argument is simple. Without these solid benchmarks, how do we evaluate anything? It all just becomes a matter of opinion.
But the counter-argument is pretty powerful. It says that, yeah, this system gives us structure, but it doesn't guarantee relevance. Maybe we've just gotten really good at counting what's easy instead of what's actually meaningful. And that can lead to a culture that rewards the sheer number of publications over the quality of the ideas, favoring safe, predictable research when the world is practically screaming for real innovation. Which leads us straight into the heart of the debate. This clash between academic rigor and real-world relevance. Can we actually have both? Or does focusing on one mean we have to sacrifice the other?
Now, from the traditional side of things, there's a practical reality we just can't ignore. These metrics, as imperfect as they might be, are what makes modern academia run. They're how institutions can evaluate their performance, build a reputation, and, this is the big one, secure the funding that makes all the research possible in the first place.
But here's the pushback. We're mixing up reputation with impact. A paper can get cited hundreds of times inside a tiny academic bubble and have absolutely zero effect on the world outside. The adaptive view says true impact isn't about what gets published, it's about what gets changed.
And this is where a serious concern comes in from the traditional camp. If academics start chasing what's popular, what has an easily provable real-world impact, don't they risk compromising their scholarly independence? Does the hunt for relevance actually threaten the very rigor that their work is built on?
But the response isn't about getting rid of rigor. It's about redefining it. No one's saying we should lower our standards. It's about achieving relevance with integrity. We can still be incredibly rigorous, but instead of only counting citations, we can use things like case studies, track the long-term influence on policy, or even measure digital engagement. It's about expanding the toolkit, not chucking the old one out.
And this whole debate isn't just about research papers. It cuts right to the other core mission of a university, teaching. What does impact even look like when you step into a classroom?
The traditionalist argument follows a logical path here, and it poses another really tricky question. If we take this same logic and apply it to teaching, what happens then? Do we start trying to measure it with metrics that feel, a bit slippery, like student experience or the societal value of a degree?
And the adaptive view would say, absolutely we should, because if a university isn't preparing its students for the world, then what's the point? At the end of the day, the single greatest outcome an institution can produce isn't a highly cited paper. It's a capable, thoughtful graduate ready to make a difference.
So we've got two very different perspectives on the table. Is there a way to bring them together? Can we find some kind of balanced approach that respects tradition but also embraces the need for change?
This is actually where the two sides can start to find some common ground. The big realization is that the problem isn't that we measure outputs at all. It's that we've become obsessed with measuring only outputs, and often that comes at the expense of everything else. That's the bridge between the two arguments.
So, building on that shared understanding, a new kind of framework starts to take shape. This isn't about getting rid of metrics, it's about making them smarter. It's about asking much deeper questions. How is our research actually shaping policy or changing how professionals work? How do our ideas travel and take on a life of their own beyond campus walls? And, crucially, how does the learning we provide actually translate into meaningful action out in the world?
So, after hearing both sides of the debate, what's the big takeaway here? Well, it really all boils down to what we decide to measure, because that, in turn, is what we'll end up managing.
You know that old saying in management, what gets measured gets managed? Well, it's absolutely true. If academia keeps measuring itself with a very narrow set of tools, it will inevitably manage itself toward a very narrow idea of success, one that risks becoming more and more irrelevant in a world that needs its wisdom more than ever.
And that brings us right back to our central theme. In this volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world, our VUCA world, the ultimate question for academia isn't about quantity. It's not about producing enough. It's about producing what matters.
In the end, the challenge isn't to stop measuring things, it's to have the courage and the imagination to measure what truly counts, to capture the full, rich story of academic impact. Because the future of academia will not be measured in papers, but in purpose.